Good morning and welcome to this Canmore Local Assessment Review Board hearing. I would like to remind everyone that the hearings are open to the public and that this hearing will be recorded and streamed live. The video recording will be our record for the hearing. We are here today to review the complaint and subsequent evidence as filed for tax roll 13323, municipal address 52 Ridge Road in Canmore. I will start by introducing the panel and then ask parties to introduce themselves. After that, I will explain our standard hearing procedure and ask for comments in that regard. My name is Dale Hildebrand, and I am the presiding officer appointed to this panel. The other panels with me today are, to my left, Joanna McCullum, and on Zoom live stream, Andrea Williams. Does anyone have any objections to the panel as constituted? Sir, are you okay with us as panel members?
I'm okay, but could you repeat my names again?
Sure, my name is Dale Hildebrand. This is Joanna McCullum, and this is Andrea Williams, sorry. Okay, and thank you, Lance. I'm now going to have the parties introduce themselves, starting with the complainant. Would you please come up, sir, and state your name for the record and confirm that you are the owner of the property under the complaint?
My name is Marek Eastman.
Sir, if I can just get you to turn the microphone on and speak there. There we go. Thank you.
I guess I will use to the procedure. My name is Marek Eastman. I'm the owner of Unit 52 Ridge Road in Canmore.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Lance Wayloggy with Benchmark Assessment Consultants. I'm the assessor for the town of Canmore, and I'll be the respondent here today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Our standard practice is to do the following. We'll have the complainant present all of their evidence first, followed by questions from the respondent and then from the panel. Next, the respondent will present their evidence, followed again by questions from the complainant and then from the panel. The complainant, sir, you will have the opportunity for rebuttal at the end. Finally, both parties will have an opportunity to present their final argument and summarize their evidence for the panel, with the complainant presenting first. If anyone needs a break or if problems come up, please let the panel know as soon as possible, and we can address those things as we go. Sometimes there's some challenges with us being live streamed. I'll also take this time to remind everyone to please turn off any mobile devices or phones. Are there any questions regarding the procedure today? Is everyone satisfied with what I've laid out? Yes, sir? Yeah.
I have three quick remarks. First, I want to thank you to the board or council, I guess, for putting the hearing on internet. I believe it adds credibility to the process. The second thing is, could you turn on? A little bit of trying to justify myself. I was away for 4 months this summer. I left June 12th and went back October 12th. I was a little bit surprised. I was told that the hearing will be October or even November. I was surprised by the date of disclosure. I had to do it in September. I have no materials with me, so my disclosure is not maybe as prepared as it should have been done or would have been done if I was here. That's just explanation. The second thing is I want to do it Right now, before we go into the dispute later, this is the rule extract of by law, which says that respondent supposed to do any written argument that the respondent intends to present at the hearing. What I'm saying here, what I'm trying to say, the respondent did not respond to my arguments. He did not, he just ignored them. So according to that statement, he cannot present any arguments now. Would the panel agree with me?
So there'll be an opportunity here in a couple minutes for you to make this this argument.
Okay, but
Okay.
I just wanted to...
Yep.
Okay. So that's several, thank you.
Okay. But sir, you're satisfied with the procedure I laid out today? And I will make sure that you have an opportunity to...
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I am.
Great, thank you. So the first thing we're going to address is any preliminary issues. And I think, sir, this is where you were at. You were pointing to this legislation and saying maybe as a preliminary issue that the rule was maybe not followed, and you're suggesting that then the respondent's evidence shouldn't be heard. Is that where you were?
No, I didn't say that. I said that
Please come up again.
I said that the respondent, according to that rule, can only use what he presented at disclosure. And at disclosure, he did not argue with me. He didn't use any argument. He basically presented the assessment process again. That was his disclosure. So what I'm saying is now he cannot present arguments against me because I'm not prepared. He never disclosed those arguments before.
Okay. So we will take that as a preliminary matter. Wish to speak to this, please?
We've disclosed our package within the prescribed timelines. Now, we can understand that the complainant feels that maybe we have not responded specifically to his issues or how he would like us to respond, but our disclosure was disclosed to the clerk within the prescribed timelines. We feel that we should be able to be heard and the evidence package be included and considered with the decision today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those submissions. I'd like to take us in camera for a few minutes to address this preliminary issue. If I could ask that the respondent and the complainant please leave the room.
Can I say something?
Yes, please go ahead.
See,
Please come up, please.
I feel I have a very bad hearing here in this room, so can the respondent repeat what he said? I didn't catch much of his saying. Even maybe without microphone would be easier.
Sure.
Just come up and let him talk to you then.
So yeah, all I was saying is that the disclosure that we disclosed, it may not be the response that you were looking for. However, the disclosure was submitted as per the described timelines within the legislation. So we feel we should be heard and presented to the board here today.
Oh, I didn't say you shouldn't. Actually, I denied it when I said that. What I said, that you only can use your disclosure.
Yeah, that's fine. We intend to present the disclosure as prepared, yeah.
Okay.
There won't be any Perry Mason moments.
Okay. If you could just please give us a few moments. Yep. If you could please just leave the room and give us a couple moments to discuss your
Andrea, the live stream is now on, and the complainant and respondent are in the room as well.
All right, we've considered your request and we've taken a close look at the legislation, which is on page 41 of 47, PDF page 47 of the respondents package. So, sir, the process, I think, has been followed appropriately. The respondent has prepared their evidence and written argument and provided it to the hearing and yourself 7 days before the hearing. If there are items in the package that the respondent argues to or makes arguments about, then that's appropriate. If they make arguments to things that aren't in that package, then we will duly consider that, and those may not be appropriate. But we're prepared to go ahead with the hearing, and we will take your concern into consideration when we do our deliberations after the hearing. Okay, so with that, we are going to continue to proceed. And sir, I would, okay, so I think that concludes then the preliminary issue. So both parties have exchanged disclosure evidence before the hearing. To save time, I propose that we mark all of those documents now. That won't stop anyone from raising questions about admissibility later. And if any questions arrive, those can be dealt with, and we will strike any material from the record as necessary or appropriate. Is everybody comfortable with this procedure? Yeah, please come forward when you speak, sir.
Thank you for responding to my concern. I have another problem now with hearing. I can't hear very well you or respondent going through microphone and speakers. I hear very well respondent when he talks out of microphone. When he did. Can we do something about that?
Can you hear me when I speak now?
Currently, I'm fine, yeah.
Okay. Maybe if you just stay near the front, and when the respondent comes up, if you want to stand beside him and listen to him, that would be fine.
I will sometimes ask to repeat if I have problems. Yes.
Maybe just put your hand up if you're having trouble hearing.
Sorry about that.
No, it's no problem. No problem at all. Sure, if you think that's, sure.
Slide this over. It'll be a little less conventional, but we can have you here. And then that way, when Lance is speaking, is that very cool? So, yeah, or, well, actually, we'll turn it this way so we can yeah.
I was on the same page. I'll just sit down.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we move you over here so that when Lance is speaking, you might be able to hear him project that way a bit better.
Yeah. Okay, so
Step over.
thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, could I then ask the clerk to read the evidence onto the record and mark them?
Today we have the complainant disclosure C1 complaint form package, which is 5 pages. The complainant disclosure C2, the complainant disclosure submission, which is 2 pages. The complainant disclosure C3, complainant rebuttal submission, which is 51 pages. And finally, we have the respondent disclosure R1, respondent disclosure submission, which is 51 pages.
Thank you. If I could now ask that the complainant, if you could please come forward and present your evidence.
I will start with evident C1 on page 4. Basically, I present the location of the house or location of the unit. Unit is on Ridge Road, which has a slope from the start until the end. And sometimes that slope is pretty steep. I present some approximate percentage of slope in the rebuttal document. Additionally to that, at the unit, at the house, the road turns 90 degrees. So that creates a pretty unique situation. For the water. What I did, I presented on page 2. I presented using original drawings of the house how water could come to the unit, and that is the water from the street. So the water could come even the street is not fulfilled. Actually, the water usually goes along the curb, and because of the turn, by inertia, when you have a certain level of water, by inertia, the water would overflow the pavement and go down steep the driveway. So this situation happened in the past. It was maybe nearly happened in the past. It was during 2013 flood. The hole near curb was almost full, and the water started going over the pavement. Again, the water would go even there is not it could go by inertia, not only because it was too much water. And that's why by inertia I showed that arrow of water going down to the unit. Actually, the unit 50, which is adjacent to my duplex, would also be a little bit involved. Now, the source of water does not have to be only a flood of creek or creek flood. It could be also terrestrial rain, which happens a lot in North America and Europe now because of the climate change. Because of this of the house located between other houses, and it's actually creates a water container. Houses up the hill, so up in that picture or left looking at the front of the house, they are naturally upper. So at least 3 of them would support water coming down through the front of the houses. Not only that, house which is down the street, the next one, only one, also has a basement level upper than my basement, and the slope is going towards my unit. So the water flow, the water flow is described on the page 3, and the water, there are 2 arrows coming from at least 3 houses uphill and 1 house going downhill. Now, This, in a certain extent, happened every spring. But if there is more water, if there is more snow rapidly melting, or there is a heavy rain, there would be more water and would flood my garage and later the first floor. That happened in the past. I mentioned the name of the owner of the other duplex, and he told me that several years ago his garage was flooded because of hailstorm. So the snow was melting rapidly and flooded his garage. My house, my duplex wasn't affected by that at that time. So what I'm saying is that my house has a quite considerable flood risk, and that risk is real, and it depends on the weather condition or the year. Garage could be flooded, or even first floor could be flooded. Again, I see the water every spring in front of my garage from the regular snowfall melting. What I believe, and I'm going to prove that a little bit later, the assessment did not use flood risk at all. Actually, Diane from the company, the agent who I talked twice after the original assessment, told me that no flood risk was considered for any of the houses along Ridge Road. That attitude causes that the assessment is not correct, and I basically ask about that assessment is changed. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, just a moment. In my second document, C2, I used the wording on page 1. The front yard of the property services, in quotes, as a drainage basin for at least 3 houses uphill and 1 house downhill. Thank you.
Does the respondent have any questions for the complainant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for the complainant? And maybe I'll start with Ms. McCullough.
Based on the evidence that, sorry, no, not based on the evidence that was provided.
Any questions, Andrea?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Sir, I have a couple questions. So I just want to make sure I fully understand your evidence. Can you come back up, please? So in your rebuttal evidence, I think I saw, or maybe you can point us to, so what are you asking us to do? So the assessment is $660,000?
You know what I did in my rebuttal? I said that I asked for $30,000 down based on a rough estimate that the damage of the flood could be $50,000 to $70,000. But I also said that I'm not assessor, and I cannot do it precisely. It's not my job. So whatever you can do to assess it properly, I would accept that.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. All right, we'll move on and hear the respondent's evidence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. To the complainant, if I'm speaking too low, I'm a low talker. So if you can't hear me, just jump in. I don't mind. It's not going to disrupt me. And same goes for the board as well. I typically start off my presentations by introducing myself, and I believe I've presented in front of all members of the board, but I'll just take this opportunity to reintroduce myself again. My name is Lance Wayloggy. I'm an accredited municipal assessor of Alberta. I am one of the owners of Benchmark Assessment Consultants, and we prepare assessments for roughly 50 municipalities in Alberta, and I've been preparing assessments for nearly 20 years now. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I think the issues are fairly straightforward in this case. The complainant feels that there's a site-specific issue with his particular property that is having essentially a decrease in property value. He's asking the board for a reduction of $30,000. So there's really two trains of thought on something like this. Determining whether this influence or this issue is a site-specific issue, or if this is more of an influence that affects many properties. With respect to site-specific issues, Mr. Chairman, an assessor is not an expert in things like soil contamination or soil issues or flood risk issues. There are experts in the field that can be brought in to determine these type of things, prepare reports to determine if, number one, there is actually an issue, number two, the extent of that issue, whether it's a minor issue or a major issue. Of course, they would present a remedy for that issue, and then what we would call a cost to cure for that issue. So if something like that had been done or is done to the property or surrounding properties because there is a site-specific issue, that's something that the assessment, that can be taken into account in the assessment. If the remedy to cure something like this is $30,000, and this comes from a report from a qualified professional pertaining to a specific issue, that's something tangible that we can use in the assessment, not only for the current year, for future years as well. Now, to my knowledge, nothing to that extent has been undertaken by a professional, a qualified professional in the field to determine if there is a flood risk on a particular site, the extent of that flood risk, whether it's minor, moderate, major, etc., and what the remedy would be, and the cost around that remedy. So there's really no evidence on a site-specific basis before us or before the board to determine whether there even is an issue here. We just don't know. And as assessors, like I said, our expertise is in the preparation of assessing using mass appraisal valuation models. So we're not experts in, like I say, soil contamination or soil issues or those type of site-specific things. Just to call out an assessor on site to have a look, we can't determine just from looking at something like that. We're not experts in that field. The second issue is more of an area. If there's an influence that affects a range of properties or an area containing some properties, and this includes anything like parks or lakes, traffic, those are the type of things that the assessor can analyze and incorporate into a valuation model, whether it's a positive addition, whether it's a negative addition. Those are the things that the assessor can look at. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if you want to turn to my page 12. This is ultimately what we're trying to demonstrate here to the board, is when a ratepayer brings an issue to the assessor with respect to something like this, what we do is we look at the sales in the area to determine if the influence has a negative impact on value. So what we're doing here is we're taking a look at sales that are within immediate proximity of the subject property. And this technique we refer to as a ratio study. And the test that we're trying to run here is we're taking a look at the assessment to sales ratio of similar sales within the area. So if you take a look at the document, we're using 48 Ridge Road, 54 Ridge Road. Both of these properties sold in 2020. The adjusted sale price was $768,100 for 48 Ridge Road. The adjusted sale price for 54 Ridge Road was $780,000. We are deriving an assessment to sales ratio using the two assessments created by our mass appraisal valuation model. That is $725,000 for 48 Ridge Road and $752,000 for 54 Ridge Road. So if you take a look at the right side of that chart, you'll see there that this produces an assessment to sales ratio for 48 Ridge Road of 0.94 and an assessment to sales ratio on 54 Ridge Road of 0.96. Now what we would do here, or what the assessor would be looking for, is because we do not adjust any of these properties within the area pertaining to any sort of negative impact on any flood risk. What we are looking for here is if the valuation model that we've established in the area and the predicted value that we use obviously in the assessment compared to the sale price would indicate to the assessor that we're over-assessing or under-assessing. So hypothetically, Mr. Chairman, if these ratios were over 1.05, it would indicate to the assessor that yes, there would be a negative impact from the influence to the surrounding properties and an adjustment would be warranted. But what you see here is you have two assessment to sales ratios that are below 1 at 0.94 and 0.96. So what that tells the assessor is that by not accounting for any influence in the area, essentially there is no negative impact due to the influences as been presented by the complainant in the area. Essentially, adding no adjustment to the property would be reasonable. One more point, Mr. Chairman.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
The houses you take into account supposed to be comparable, aren't they? Are they not?
Well, in a ratio study like this, essentially the assessment accounts for any differences between the properties. That is to say, if a house is bigger, it's going to have a higher assessment. So this technique, the ratio study technique, essentially is a way to isolate the variable that you're analyzing. So you can still use, quote unquote, less comparable properties in the area by using the ratio study technique because the analysis is isolating that influence, the thing that you're trying to test. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
One last thing, Mr. Chairman, if you turn to page 15. So this is the Town of Canmore Steep Creek Hazard Map. So this sort of identifies areas where there would be an extreme, a medium, or a low identified area where there would be a steep creek. As you can see, if you turn to page 16, which is a little bit closer look to the subject's area, we've indicated on the right side of that chart a little area just highlighting where the subject property is located. And by this map, it would indicate that this is in a low steep creek area, certainly not in any sort of moderate or extreme steep creek areas as you would indicate on this map by the red, yellow, and orange highlights. At the end of the day, it helps make sense of what the data is saying, i.e. that there is no negative impact to the area because of the steepness as been described by the complainant. Mr. Chairman, Madam, members of the board, we think with the evidence that we've presented forward, we think that it's sufficient enough to demonstrate that there is no negative loss in value here as described by the complainant, and we would request the board confirm the assessment. Thank you.
Sir, do you have any further questions? Sorry, sir, can I get you to just maybe come up and share the mic? So that we can, yeah, maybe just come over to this mic. Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
That picture on page 16.
Sir, can I just get you to come over to the mics and make sure that Ms. Williams can hear you?
That last picture you discussed, how would you use in your assessment?
This would just be to identify influences. So for example, if there were houses that were in the red area or yellow area, it would be an indication to the assessor to potentially analyze whether there was a negative impact to value that needs to be reflected in the mass appraisal valuation model. So this is just to show the assessor where there could be potential areas for analysis.
Okay, I have then a question. Some of the houses in upper part of the street, they have low risk, yes, according to that picture. Your worker, Diane,
Deanne.
sorry?
Deanne.
Diane, sorry.
That's okay.
Mentioned that no houses in Ridge Road took into the assessment of no houses in Ridge Road took into account flood risk. So basically, you didn't take into account even for those houses who are marked here as having risk.
Yeah, that's correct. Like this would just give an indication of where to look, where to analyze sales to see if there's an impact on value. Just because there's red on the map itself doesn't necessarily mean that the market is going to significantly reflect a loss in value in those areas. All this would do is give an assessor an area to look, in a sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other questions, sir?
No.
Thank you. We'll now move on to board questions, and I'll start with Ms. Williams. Any questions for the respondent?
I do actually. Mr. Wayland, you made reference to the fact that if the complainant presented a report to indicate the impact to the value of his property or the cost to cure a defect, that would be something the assessor could take into account in relation to a single property. I'm wondering if you and the complainant had the opportunity to speak about this prior to the hearing at all, so that he was aware of that.
Okay. So our office has had discussions with the complainant. As he mentioned, he was actually talking to one of our other assessors, my colleague Deanne. So I'm not privy to the exact conversations between the two, but it may be a question for the complainant.
Okay.
Do you?
I did not understand, sorry. Just hearing problem.
Okay. Maybe I'll try, because it's a little bit hard here,
Sure.
Ms. Williams, across the Zoom. So when you spoke with Diana, did she mention to you that you could get a third party to review the flood hazard to your property, and that, hire someone to do that for you, and that would be some better evidence that you could bring forward to this hearing?
No, neither of us mentioned that. I didn't realize I could, although I asked for a view of assessment after we talked, and she refused. That was
Okay.
it. I was very surprised because I thought I had the case, but she refused to go any further.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Great, thanks. Do you have any additional questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Ms. McCallum?
I don't have any questions for the respondent based on the evidence provided.
Great, thank you. I have a couple questions, maybe just help us understand here a little bit more. I'd like to go back to R1, where you took us to page 12. And then subsequently on pages 13, 14, and 15, you provided the reports, I guess, for the three properties that you've shown here.
Correct.
And if I look at this table, we see, adjusted sale prices kind of in the 780 range for the two properties. And when I look at the comparison data here around lot area and floor area, can you just maybe tell me why this property is assessed at 660 when the neighboring properties are more than $100,000 more?
Yeah, so if you take a look at the building type, so the two-story properties are stratified separately than your bungalows or your bi-levels or your splits. So oftentimes the rate per square foot, even though a two-story might be 1,400 square foot, typically a rate per square foot, it would sell for a little bit less than, say, a bungalow, which is also 1,400 square feet. So it's just a difference in structure type from what I can see would be the biggest thing, yeah.
Great, thank you. And you took us to look at the Steep Creek map. And as I read through this, and I'll just maybe read it. Development in Canmore must address unique conditions in the town, including natural environmental considerations, flood hazards, groundwater, subsurface hazards, etc. So this map, and I guess the study that produced this map, really wasn't intending to address specific situations like what the complainants brought forward of a steep road that may have water coming into an individual property. This is more natural environmental considerations. Is that fair? Do you have any comments on that for us?
Not sure if I have any additional comments, other than we would read the report kind of at face value, just as, like you say, an indication of the steepness or the steep creek within these various different zones on the map. So for us, we just wanted to have sort of an understanding or a background of, does the complainant's argument make sense in respect to some of the topography issues that he's mentioned there, and is it related to maybe the steepness in some of these areas? When we take a look at the map, it is in sort of a low area, so it may not be, like you say, an area issue, but more of a site-specific issue for the complainant.
Okay, can you explain to us or give us some comments that when you are doing your mass assessments, do you actually look at this map and say, oh, these properties have a risk of flooding and therefore take that into consideration? Is that one of the sort of variables in the model? I
think in general, Mr. Chairman, we do analyze and track a lot of influences. Now it is true we haven't applied anything in this area, and with the limited sales data that we have, we don't think it's necessary to apply a negative adjustment to any of the properties in this area. But in general, I'll speak to the general preparation of assessments. Yes, we track a lot of influences in mass, enough to year over year do analysis on specific influences which are adding and subtracting value. So like I mentioned earlier, some of those influences might be proximity to golf courses or parks or green strips, things like that. So.
Great, Okay, well, I think that concludes the board's questions. I'd now like to move on to rebuttal evidence. So, sir?
Yes, sir.
That's okay. As a complaint, do you have any additional evidence you'd like to bring forward that, based on the hearing today, not what you've already provided to us in writing, but is there anything that's come up today, that anything additionally you want us to consider?
I'm not sure whether that would constitute of that point, but in 2014, I was buying the house, actually we were buying the house, and we noticed the risk, flood risk right away, like it was obvious for us, and we pointed to the owner and we were able to lower the price because of that. It was second actually act of lowering the price, so I feel that, because I mentioned that because Diane told me, you sort of have to have an impact of that. I said that was the impact. We mentioned that to the owner, it maybe it's not, the other thing she said, it may be not obvious to everybody. I don't feel that way, but that's what she said, and it was obvious to us.
Okay, thank you for that. Respondent, any questions on that rebuttal?
No, Mr. Chairman, no question.
Thank you. Board questions? Ms. Williams? Ms. Collins?
So, sir, I read in your in your original submission, what you just said about when you had bought the property in 2014, that the water issue in the driveway allowed you to negotiate a different price. Do you have any evidence to match that statement?
You mean that bargaining?
Yeah, of the bargaining that allowed you to lower the price based on that site-specific thing.
There is but usually you would write it down, so it could be. I don't have it right now.
Okay. And I just have one more question. To follow up, another question, when you've owned this property since 2014 and you've noted that there's been this water issue, do you have any evidence to provide to show that you have gotten pricing or there's a problem to clear the issue up, to solve the flooding problem in your driveway?
Sorry, what are you asking for? Whether I had what?
I guess my question is you've known that this issue is on your property for a while.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's not an ideal situation. Do you have evidence to provide that you have received a quote or to get the work complete to, so that this issue doesn't continue on your property?
Yes.
And was that part of your
first
submission?
I want to demonstrate something for you. If I'm in the house, and that's my front, on my left, if there is, I could actually dig a ditch so the water can come out, but it's not feasible because the water would go to my neighbor. That's because of the profile of the land, so I cannot do that. Even didn't ask for that. But I was thinking about building a drainage to the back of the house. I mentioned that there is no problem with flooding as far as the back of the houses are concerned, because there is a natural ditch probably going back to the ice field on the mountain. So if I drain the water to the back of the house, that would solve the problem, provided the flood is not extensive enough. So because theoretically, when you try to drain something and your drainage is not effective enough, you will still flood it.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Ms. McCollum? Okay, we're now going to move on to arguments.
I have a question. Can I go through my rebuttal? Because I haven't chance.
So your rebuttal was intended to be part of your written evidence, and that should have come sooner. But in your argument now, you have an opportunity to make your argument, and if you want to make an argument and refer to your rebuttal evidence, we'll allow you to do that. Okay?
Okay.
So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very briefly. So on page 2, I mentioned that respondent document does not address my complaint about the flood risk. What it does, it basically repeats the process of the assessment. I'm showing that this assessment is incorrect. By the way, I'm sorry you mentioned that. My rebuttal actually is done on the top of respondent evidence. It was easier for me to do it that way. There's a couple of things which really bothered me on page 3 of his evidence. I just mentioned number 1, the number 2 and number 3 you can read, but the number 1 is sort of strange for me. Assessments are, he's going to demonstrate to the board that assessments are prepared annually and independent of the previous year's assessment. This is not done here. I don't see any evidence for that. On page 4, you can see the picture actually showing the steepness of my driveway, and there's a snowbank to the right, that snowbank, by the way, or snow presence, can ruin the effort of put a drainage, because if you have a drainage, you have input. If it's covered by snow and ice, the drainage won't work. And there is a steep of the hill from the left in the picture and to the right. So it's like a natural container for water. There is on page 5. There is I drew the line of front of the houses, and it's showing that Unit 52, it's back from that line, which causes that the container is even bigger, container for water is even bigger than it should be. By the way, none of the houses above that house has that problem. None of the houses, to my knowledge, I only mentioned few, I'm not saying thousands of houses, but the houses, they don't have the problem, and the house below me does not have the problem, and so it's draining from both sides, unfortunately. It's about market value. There is a couple of statements about that. Assessment of property based on value must, point C, reflect typical market condition for properties similar to that properties.
Sir, is there something you're specifically referring to now? Can you give us the page number?
Sorry,
No
page
problem.
number 8. Sorry, page 8.
Thank you.
In the fragment says market value.
Yes.
It says assessment of property based on market value, and now I'm going to point C, must reflect typical market conditions for properties similar to that property. And in my opinion, those two properties chosen are not similar because of that risk. Actually, which is very ironic, they are source of water for my house. So definitely they are not similar. So that characteristic is different, very different from my house, my unit, and the other units. I'm moving to page 10. There is a fragment saying direct comparison approach. And my remark is the flaw in that reasoning is that they are using non-comparable sales for their calculation, for non-comparable houses sales for the calculation. I'm moving to page 12. What I showed in here is approximate percentage of the slope. So for houses above me, it's about 9%. It's really average because it's not going as a straight line. The street, it's about 11%. The driveway, about 17%. And the slope from my downhill neighbor is about 3 to 4%. Those numbers are not precise at all. I was using a very simple tool. I didn't have professional, but it shows what's happening in my unit. How am I am surrounded by those slopes. Okay, going back to that already discussed steep creek risk, I'm not sure what page is that, page 16, what it shows about my unit, remember when I was talking about inertia of the water going to my unit, the water which goes down the street, it shows very well because the water wants to go straight, and basically because of that part of it falls into my driveway. So that is because of that curve, 90 degree of the street. Okay. Thank you. On page 22, I basically respectfully asked to change the assessment. And also I am saying that I'm not assessor. My $30,000 value request was because there was on the form, you had to do it. So that's why I put it, and I put it not out of the blue, but because of, that flood could be very costly, 50, 70,000. And I ask for the estimate for the professional assessor. Thank you.
You're welcome. We now ask the respondent to provide your argument summation.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Appreciate you hearing our argument and our evidence today. Very much appreciated. Again, I think it comes down to two issues. We talked a little bit about the site-specific and more of the area. When we talk about the site-specific portion and the arguments that the complainant had led forward, again, an assessor is an expert in valuation, specifically within mass appraisal valuation models. So we can look at the impact of influences on maybe an area scale, a larger scale, and ultimately that's what we've tried to demonstrate to the board here, that there's no area negative impact based on the sales that we've put forth. With respect to the site-specific issues, again, there are experts in the field with soil contamination, soil issues, flood issues, those type of things. They would be the more appropriate people to come in on a site-specific basis, look at whether there is an issue, determine the degree of that issue, determine what the remedy would be, and ultimately what the cost to cure would be. We think if there is a site-specific issue, that would be a more appropriate route, because then we can look at actual tangible costs if there were. We don't know if there is, again. A report could certainly come in and say, there's, like the complainant said, all you have to do is maybe just dig a ditch, very low cost, really nothing too extreme. We don't know, but we think if there are some site-specific issues, it should have been done. There is no evidence before the board from any experts saying that a remedy needs to take place, and to what extent by way of any sort of cost to cure. We respectfully ask the board to confirm the assessment. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And sir, as the complainant, you get the last word. Is there anything further you'd like to say to us? Any further submissions you'd like to make?
I want to respond to Joanne's question. I'm not sure whether it came out clearly. This year, in the summer, I built the drainage, which goes to the back of the house. Again, I'm not sure how this drainage, it cost me about $1,500. I dig out myself. The reason was I couldn't use the machine because of this narrow area. So it was hard work. I used the pipe and a special type of input to the pipe. However, I'm not sure how this is going to work because the pipe has only 4-inch diameter. And the biggest concern is that if there's ice in the input, it doesn't work. It's basically like no pipe, no drainage. So it's not easy. And I was concerned about this, as I said, since I bought the house. So it's not something I make up for this meeting. Again, I ask to review the case or reassess it.
Great. Thank you very much for your submissions. I'd like to thank everyone for your cooperation and your very helpful presentations to us here today. This time I'd like to ask the parties if they feel that they've been heard and if they feel that they've received a fair hearing. The complainant, are you felt that you've been heard here today?
Yes, I did.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you very much. I will now declare the hearing closed. No further evidence or submissions may be received by the board. The Municipal Government Act requires a written decision within 30 days and gives the clerk an additional 7 days to issue a decision. We will make every issue to beat or meet those requirements, and the clerk will forward a decision to you at our earliest opportunity. So with that, we're finished for today. Thank you again, everyone, for your time and your cooperation.